I've had it with you and your uninteresting existence. I'm seizing everything. And incidentally, the house has been put up for sale. Enjoy the remnants. The message, left on my kitchen counter, struck me with the force of a physical blow. My hands shook as I processed the harsh words, messily written by David on the reverse side of our electricity bill. A mix of feelings surged through me: surprise, pain, fury, yet oddly, a sense of calm resolve emerged as the dominant emotion. I retrieved my phone and composed a brief reply. Received your message. Thank you for the notification. My name is Nina Parker, and at 36, I never anticipated finding myself in my kitchen, deciphering a farewell note from my spouse of 12 years. I am an entrepreneur, having established a thriving online business that markets handcrafted jewelry, something David consistently minimized as my minor pastime. Reflecting on it, I should have anticipated this. The indicators were evident: the prolonged hours at his workplace, the secretive phone conversations, the way he would hastily shut his laptop whenever I entered the room. However, David was unaware that I was not as gullible as he believed. 6 months prior, I detected something peculiar while settling our bills. Significant amounts of money were being moved from our shared account to an account I did not know. When I casually brought it up to David, he dismissed it as investments for the business. That's when I realized I needed to take precautions. Externally, I may have appeared to be the ideal, supportive wife, but internally, I was gearing up for a confrontation. I began meticulously recording everything: the unexplained expenditures, the questionable phone calls, even the instances when he claimed to be working late, yet his office building was deserted when I checked. I established a separate bank account and steadily transferred my personal funds there. I sought advice from Sarah, my closest friend and a divorce lawyer, who helped me comprehend my legal standing and available choices. Crucially, during our recent home refurbishment, I had the house refinanced exclusively under my name, something David was too engrossed in his own investments to observe. Now, standing in our kitchen, my kitchen, reading his feeble attempt at asserting control, I couldn't suppress a slight smile. David consistently undervalued me, treating me as an ignorant housewife who pretended to operate a business. He likely assumed this note would devastate me, leaving me shattered and pleading for his return. Instead, I felt strangely emancipated. The charade was finally over. I inhaled deeply, adjusted my blouse, and retrieved my laptop. It was time to initiate the necessary actions. David desired a confrontational approach, and he was about to discover that I had been preparing for this far longer than he knew. The indications of David's duplicity had begun subtly. Last Christmas, he presented me with a silver bracelet that appeared costly but proved to be an inexpensive imitation. I would know, having dealt with exquisite jewelry for years. When I questioned him about it, he deflected, labeling me as materialistic and unappreciative. That was David's typical behavior, constantly making me question myself, always manipulating situations to portray me as the irrational one. Our relationship was not always this way. Initially, David was supportive of my aspirations. He assisted me in establishing my first online store and celebrated with champagne when I achieved my first significant sale. However, as my business expanded, something shifted within him. Perhaps it was pride, perhaps jealousy, but he began making sarcastic remarks about my small online shop at social gatherings, implying that I was merely pretending to be a businesswoman while he performed real work at his accounting firm. I recall the day I secured a contract with a prominent department store chain. Instead of celebrating, David barely glanced up from his phone. "That's nice, dear," he said, trivializing what was arguably the most significant accomplishment of my career. That night, I cried myself to sleep, not from sadness but from anger. Anger at myself for allowing him to belittle my achievements, for remaining silent when he disparaged me in front of our acquaintances. The definitive wake-up call occurred 3 months ago. I was having coffee with my sister Janet, who works at the same bank David used for his business accounts. She hesitated before informing me that she had observed something troubling: substantial withdrawals, suspicious transfers. "Nah," she said, clasping my hand across the table. I believe he's scheming something. You must safeguard yourself. That conversation altered everything. I began noticing details I had previously overlooked. The way David always insisted on managing our finances, despite my business acumen. The enigmatic weekend business trips he couldn't elucidate. The hushed phone conversations that ceased abruptly when I entered the room. Each revelation was like a piece of a puzzle I hadn't wanted to assemble. I contacted Sarah, my closest friend since college and now a successful divorce attorney. Over lunch, she listened attentively and then gave me a stern look. "Anne," she said, "you are intelligent, successful, and more resilient than you acknowledge. Cease playing the role you've been assigned. Start playing chess instead of checkers." So that's precisely what I did. While David believed I was preoccupied with my minor pastime, I was meticulously documenting every questionable transaction, every unexplained absence, every falsehood. I maintained my plans discreetly, upheld my routine, and played the part of the trusting spouse while covertly preparing for the impending storm I knew was approaching. The day following the discovery of David's note, I received an email from our real estate agent, Marcus. My heart fluttered when I saw the subject line, "Urgent. House sale documentation required." Upon opening it, I learned that David had indeed attempted to list our house for sale. However, there was a complication. He couldn't proceed without my signature, as the refinancing documents had placed the house solely under my name during our renovation. I remembered that day vividly. David had been too occupied to attend the meeting with the bank, casually instructing me to just handle it. He had signed a power of attorney without even perusing it, assuming I would simply do what I had always done, manage the details while he made the crucial decisions. His negligence had just become his most significant blunder. I contacted Marcus immediately. "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding," I stated calmly. "I have not authorized any sale of the property." There was an uncomfortable silence before Marcus explained that David had been quite adamant about listing the house promptly. I could sense the unease in his voice as he described David's arrogant assumption that everything was already settled. Just then, my phone vibrated with a text message from David. "Call the real estate agent. Sign the papers when they arrive. I'll give you 24 hours to pack your belongings." The disdain in his message infuriated me, but I retained my composure. This was the moment I had been anticipating. I dialed Sarah's number. "It's time," I said when she answered. She understood instantly. We had been preparing for this scenario for months, gathering evidence, documenting everything. She had already drafted the divorce papers, foreseeing David's eventual action. However, unlike his plans, ours were legally sound and comprehensive. "Remember," Sarah advised, "do not respond to any more of his messages. Let him believe he's in command. We'll confront him with everything simultaneously: the protected house deed, the documented fund transfers, everything." Her assurance bolstered my resolve. This was no longer solely about safeguarding my assets. It was about asserting myself after years of subtle manipulation and belittlement. I sat at my desk, gazing at the framed photograph of David and me from happier times. The smiling woman in the picture seemed like a stranger now, someone who was yet to realize her own strength. I removed the frame and placed it in a drawer. It was time to determine my next steps, and for the first time in our marriage, I held all the leverage. The following morning, I received a deluge of increasingly irate text messages from David. "Why isn't the house listed yet? Marcus indicates there's an issue with the paperwork. Cease playing games and sign the documents." Each message exposed his escalating frustration as his meticulously crafted plans began to disintegrate. I was in my home office, completing some jewelry orders, when the doorbell rang. Standing on my porch was David, his face reddened with fury. This was the first time I had seen him since discovering his note, and I was astonished to feel nothing but serene determination. "What did you do?" he demanded, shoving past me into the foyer. "Marcus says I can't sell the house without your signature, but that's impossible. I managed all our financial affairs." I folded my arms, maintaining my ground. Did you? Like you managed my business accounts? My voice was unwavering, concealing the rapid beating of my heart. The ones you've been surreptitiously transferring money from. His face paled momentarily before he regained his composure. What are you implying? I made some investments for our future. You wouldn't comprehend. You merely play with beads all day. Actually, I comprehend perfectly, I retorted, walking to my desk and retrieving a substantial folder. I understand that you've been siphoning funds from our joint accounts. I understand that you attempted to sell a house that is exclusively in my name. And I understand that you believed I was too unintelligent to notice any of it. David's expression transitioned from anger to bewilderment, then to something resembling fear. What do you mean? The house is solely in your name. Remember that refinancing paperwork you were too preoccupied to read? The renovation meeting you couldn't be bothered to attend? I watched as comprehension dawned on his face. You relinquished your rights to the house. It's mine, David, just like the business you deemed a mere hobby, the one that is now worth more than your yearly income. He collapsed onto the couch, his arrogance dissipating. You can't do this to me, he stated, but his voice had lost its sharpness. I've already made arrangements. I have plans. Plans that necessitated my money, my house, and my obedience, I interjected. But here's what's actually going to transpire. You're going to depart from my house, and my lawyer will be contacting you regarding the divorce proceedings. And those funds you transferred, we'll be discussing those as well. David attempted to regain his composure, straightening his tie as he stood up. You're bluffing, he asserted, but I could detect the uncertainty in his voice. You don't possess the resources or the knowledge to challenge me on this. I walked to my desk and retrieved another folder. You mean like these bank statements, demonstrating systematic withdrawals from our joint accounts? I presented document after document. Or these emails you inadvertently left open on our shared iPad, discussing your intentions to leave. Or perhaps you'd be interested in examining the private investigator's report concerning your business trips to Vegas. His face grew paler with each disclosure. You hired a private investigator? No, David. Sarah did. You recall Sarah, correct? My coffee friend, whom you never regarded seriously, the one who happens to be one of the most esteemed divorce attorneys in the state. I maintained my voice level, even as I observed him beginning to disintegrate. He ran his hands through his hair, pacing the room. This isn't how this was intended to unfold, he muttered. You were supposed to, what, deteriorate? Plead with you to remain? Accept whatever remnants you decided to leave me? I shook my head. That's not occurring. I've already frozen our joint accounts. Legally, since I possess documentation of your unauthorized withdrawals. The house isn't going anywhere. And my business, well, that was never yours to seize in the first place. David's phone vibrated. He glanced at it, and I could see the color drain from his face. Your lawyer, he said weakly. She is already initiating the divorce proceedings. Yes, she's also requesting an urgent hearing regarding the funds you transferred. We possess records of everything, David. Every transaction, every email, every deception. He slumped back onto the couch, appearing vanquished. I didn't believe you'd resist, he confessed. You always simply acquiesced to everything. That was your most significant misjudgment, I replied. You were so preoccupied with undervaluing me that you never noticed I'd ceased undervaluing myself. The doorbell rang once more. This time it was Sarah, precisely on schedule. David looked up, panic finally taking hold as he comprehended just how comprehensively he'd been outmaneuvered. You should depart now, I stated firmly. Any subsequent communication can proceed through our legal representatives. I opened the front door, where Sarah stood with a professional demeanor and a briefcase brimming with supplementary documents we'd prepared. As David passed Sarah, he resembled a shadow of the self-assured man who had left that harsh note in my kitchen. Nah, please. He attempted one final time. We can discuss this. Like you discussed selling our house with me? I inquired. Or about depleting our accounts? Sarah placed a gentle hand on my shoulder, reminding me to remain composed and focused. David's phone began ringing. It was his bank. Sarah had cautioned me this would occur the instant our divorce petition was submitted. It triggered an inquiry into those dubious transfers he'd made. I observed as he answered the call, his face growing increasingly distressed as he listened. "What do you mean, frozen?" He stammered into the phone. "No, you don't comprehend. I require access to those accounts." He looked at me imploringly, finally grasping just how thoroughly his schemes had miscarried. Sarah stepped forward, her voice professional yet resolute. "Mr. Parker, I advise you to contact your own legal counsel. We possess substantial proof of financial impropriety, and the court regards these matters with utmost seriousness." David's legs appeared to weaken, and he sank onto the front steps of what he now recognized was no longer his residence. Tears began streaming down his face. Not tears of contrition, I observed, but tears of exasperation and defeat. Every plan he'd devised, every stratagem he'd meticulously formulated, was collapsing around him. "I never anticipated," he began. "That's—" "Correct," I interjected. "You never anticipated. You never anticipated I'd assert myself. You never anticipated I'd be astute enough to safeguard myself. You never anticipated I'd be resilient enough to depart. That's why you left a note instead of engaging in an honest dialogue, because you never genuinely knew me at all." As we watched him slowly walk to his car, Sarah squeezed my hand. "You performed admirably. Exceptionally admirably." She had been more than merely my lawyer throughout all of this. She had been my steadfast support, assisting me in discovering a fortitude I didn't realize I possessed. David's car vanished around the corner, and I felt a burden lift from my shoulders. The pretense was over. No more scrutinizing bank statements in secrecy. No more documenting his falsehoods. No more enacting the role of the compliant spouse. I was liberated. In the ensuing weeks, I immersed myself in reconstructing my life. The jewelry enterprise, which David had disparaged for so long, became my refuge. Orders were inundating, and I was finally at liberty to expand without enduring sarcastic remarks about squandering money on new equipment or materials. Sarah kept me abreast of the legal proceedings. David had retained an aggressive attorney, but it was inconsequential. We had meticulously documented everything. The judge was particularly intrigued by the paper trail of his financial malfeasance. Those business investments he'd been making, they transpired to be gambling losses in Vegas and endeavors to conceal money in accounts I wasn't supposed to discover. The house, my exquisite craftsman-style residence that I'd painstakingly renovated, remained mine. I redecorated, gradually eradicating traces of David, room by room. I painted the living room the deep blue hue he'd always disapproved of, converted his home office into my jewelry studio, and finally procured that antique workbench I'd been coveting for years. Each alteration felt like reclaiming a fragment of myself. My sister Janet visited frequently, assisting me in sifting through years of accumulated recollections. "Remember how he used to deride your minor pastime at family gatherings?" she inquired one evening as we sorted through old photographs. "Now observe you. You're featured in 3 prominent magazines, and he's residing in a 1-bedroom apartment." She was correct. The business was flourishing now that I could concentrate on it fully. I'd employed 2 assistants to aid with orders, and a major department store had just acquired my newest collection. The irony was not lost on me. Everything David had belittled was now sustaining me, while his intelligent investments had left him virtually destitute. My companions rallied around me in ways I never anticipated. Sarah, beyond being my attorney, spent numerous evenings with me, assisting me in processing everything. "You're not merely enduring," she informed me over wine one night. "You're thriving." She was accurate. I felt more robust, more self-assured, more authentically myself than I had in years. The divorce proceedings unveiled even more of David's deceptions than I had uncovered. The bank's investigation revealed that he'd been squandering substantial sums of money on gambling for years, concealing the losses and endeavoring to cover them with the funds he intended to procure from selling the house. When that scheme disintegrated, everything else did as well. One morning, I received an email from Marcus, the real estate agent. He apologized profusely for his involvement in David's attempted house sale and inquired if I'd be interested in assisting his wife in selecting jewelry for their anniversary. I smiled at the irony. My minor pastime was now garnering me esteem from the very individuals who had once dismissed it. The most arduous aspect wasn't the legal conflicts or even the solitude. It was confronting how much of myself I'd suppressed to sustain the semblance of a blissful marriage. I dimmed my radiance, curtailed my aspirations, and doubted my instincts for years. However, as I sat in my studio, crafting a bespoke piece while sunlight streamed through the windows, I comprehended that I was finally living life on my own terms. 6 months after discovering David's note, I attended a local business owners' gala. It was the first time I'd been to a significant social event since the divorce, and I'd nearly dissuaded myself from attending, but Sarah insisted, stating it was time to re-engage with the world appropriately. I wore a black dress that David would have deemed too ostentatious, and jewelry from my own latest collection. As I entered the ballroom, I caught sight of my reflection in a mirror and scarcely recognized myself. Gone was the tentative woman who used to consult with her husband before making any decision. In her place stood someone self-assured, someone who recognized her own value. During the evening, I encountered several couples who used to be our acquaintances. Most had learned about the divorce through the grapevine, and their responses were enlightening. The wives, in particular, seemed altered around me, more candid, more genuine. One of them, Barbara, drew me aside and confided that my narrative had emboldened her to scrutinize her own marriage more closely. "When I learned how you managed everything," she whispered, "it made me realize I don't have to accept being treated as unintelligent simply because I opted to initiate my own business instead of remaining in corporate law." The gala was also where I first encountered James, a widowed artisan who crafted bespoke wooden jewelry boxes. We conversed for hours about craftsmanship and operating creative enterprises. He examined my work with sincere interest and posed insightful inquiries about my techniques. Not once did he label it adorable or dismiss it as a pastime. It wasn't romance, not yet, but it was a reminder that there were individuals who could perceive me for who I genuinely was. David attempted to contact me a few times, particularly after the court mandated him to reimburse the funds he'd extracted from our joint accounts. His messages oscillated between fury and supplication, but they no longer affected me. The final time he reached out, he actually apologized, not for the note or the attempted larceny, but for not valuing what we possessed. I did not respond. Certain chapters are best left unread. My business persisted in expanding. I broadened into instructing jewelry-making workshops, something David had always asserted would be a waste of time. The classes filled up promptly, and observing other women unearth their ingenuity became one of my most profound gratifications. Many of them shared narratives akin to mine, of aspirations postponed, of aptitudes dismissed, of potential interred beneath others' expectations. The house that David had attempted to sell out from under me became a genuine sanctuary. I hosted monthly gatherings for local female entrepreneurs, transforming my refurbished dining room into a locale where women could share their tribulations and celebrate their triumphs. The room that once reverberated with David's disparaging remarks now resounded with mirth and encouragement. Reflecting on that morning, I discovered David's note. I realized it wasn't the conclusion he intended it to be. It was the inception I necessitated. The woman who stood trembling in that kitchen, deciphering his harsh words, could never have envisioned how much more resilient she would become. Every tear I shed, every night I spent poring over bank statements and legal documents, every instant of uncertainty and apprehension, they all guided me to where I am presently. My jewelry enterprise has expanded beyond anything I could have envisioned. We are now shipping globally, and I've been featured in several prominent fashion magazines. The minor pastime that David derided now employs 8 individuals and possesses a waiting list for bespoke pieces. However, more than the professional triumph, I am proud of the woman I've become. The other day, I unearthed that note from David, tucked away in a drawer. Reading those irate words, "I've had it with you and your uninteresting existence," elicited laughter. My life is anything but uninteresting now. I am traveling to artisan fairs across the nation, instructing women to create and value their own creations, and cultivating a community I never realized I required. Sarah frequently suggests I compose a book about my experience, but I believe I am narrating my tale in a distinct manner, through the fortitude I demonstrate to other women who are where I once was. Every time I share my odyssey at my workshops, I perceive recognition in someone's eyes, and I know they are discovering their own valor to assert themselves. Occasionally, when I am working late in my studio, I contemplate how divergent things could have transpired if I hadn't prepared for the tempest I sensed approaching, if I hadn't heeded my instincts, documented everything, and discreetly constructed my safety net. David's note could have shattered me. Instead, it emancipated me. Last week, I received a letter from David's sister, informing me he's still grappling to reconstruct his life. She conveyed that he finally conceded to her how profoundly he regrets undervaluing me, how his hubris cost him everything. A part of me yearns for him to have gleaned something from all of this, but I no longer feel accountable for his maturation or contentment. My life has assumed a trajectory I could never have envisioned while married to David. The house he attempted to sell out from under me has become a haven for ingenuity and empowerment. The business he dismissed has become a wellspring of inspiration for other women, and I've become someone I am proud to be: robust, autonomous, and unapologetically prosperous. Yesterday, a young woman in one of my workshops inquired if I ever lament how things concluded with David. I displayed to her the unassuming silver ring I crafted for myself after the divorce was finalized. Engraved inside are the words, "Trust your strength." Because that's what this voyage has imparted to me. We are all considerably more resilient than we acknowledge. Occasionally, it merely necessitates a harsh note on a kitchen counter to assist us in discovering it.